So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the ESPI 15th Autumn Conference. I'm Jean-Jacques Tortora. I'm a director of the European Space Policy Institute, and it is my pleasure to open this second session of our annual events, where I would say a series of high-level speakers from both the public and private sectors have come together to discuss an outstanding issue at stake for the space sector at large, but for the European space sector in particular, which is specifically which European space infrastructure for the new digital age. Like yesterday, we have adopted a hybrid format to cope with sanitary restrictions, obviously, and our speakers are here today in our premises in Vienna, while the event is broadcasted online with live interaction with the audience. The overarching theme of our conference this year is the European Space Solutions for European Ambitions, and why does Europe need European satellites? And the point that we discuss with the high-level officials here with us today is how space will contribute and can contribute to I would say helping Europe to face the major upcoming challenges like the Green Deal, and more specifically this afternoon, the advent of a new digital age. And tomorrow we will enter into further detail regarding their consequences on our economic resilience. So this conference, as you may have noticed, spans across 3 days with one panel every day in the afternoon. Yesterday we had one session on the Green Deal for Space, Green Deal in Space. So this afternoon today it's about the space infrastructure for the new digital age. And tomorrow, as I said, industrial strategy to face new global challenges. So the audience hopefully will be able to join and to ask questions to the speakers through the online conference software. Zoom, please do not hesitate to make use of that, and we will pay all efforts to make sure that we will address them to the largest extent at the end of our panel, where we will have a lively Q&A session in the end. So to open this second session, we have today the honor and the privilege to have with us Mr. Rodrigo da Costa. Mr. Rodrigo da Costa is Executive Director of the EU Space Program Agency. So, Mr. da Costa, since you have been appointed as the first Executive Director of this new agency, which builds on the heritage of the former GSA, which needs to be reminded, you have been very busy in defining how the EU space program can best serve the interests of European citizens. So when it comes to digital and connectivity, what is your vision of the situation? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jean-Jacques and the ESPI team for the invite for being with you in this afternoon. Thank you also. Good afternoon to the panelists today, and thank you and good afternoon also to all the audience that is listening today. It's a pity that we cannot be in present, but at least we have a small presence here. Thank you as well for a question that I consider extremely opportune, and in particular in a very special moment to talk about space policy in Europe, and which is the EU space infrastructure for the digital age. The question is indeed very opportune. It is very opportune because we are starting the EU space program that has been decided by the European Union in spring, and that has led also to the creation of our agency, the EU agency for the space program, and as you said, building upon the heritage of the former European GNSS agency, also known as the GSA. To try to answer this question, I will split my answer in two separate points. First, let me start by the obvious. There is already a EU space infrastructure, and that EU space infrastructure is already today key for the transition of Europe to the digital age. Galileo and EGNOS, they are providing positioning data from space, which is crucial for our economy, is crucial for our safety, and for our security. In many areas, for example, on IoT, but also on agriculture, on traffic management, energy management, just to name a few. Second as well, Copernicus. Copernicus generates very important Earth observation data, also of use in many sectors of our daily life. And here, while the services are provided by, that are provided by Galileo and Copernicus will continue to evolve, it is crucial, it is very important to continue fostering their adoption. We have to make sure that this digital infrastructure we have in space is providing concrete benefits. And we will do this by working on them alone, making sure that they are uptaken by the market, but also by creating synergies. And synergies are extremely important between Galileo and Copernicus on many sectors. So this is the obvious, is what we have today. Now, second, let's look at what lays ahead. Right ahead in our horizon, there is, of course, GovSatcom. GovSatcom is the European Union governmental satellite communication solution. The European Union governments need satellite communications capability. By many reasons, let me cite a few. It's highly available, it is resilient, and it's easy to set up and deploy. And today, there are capabilities existing in Europe. However, those capabilities in the European Union are fragmented. And in order to cope with this fragmentation, there is a real opportunity to improve. To improve the use of resources, but also to improve interoperability between the existing systems. Of course, the answer to this challenge is GovSatcom, which is the pooling of the capacity and services with the appropriate security assurance that the governmental customers and users require. Also ahead, there is the Secure Connectivity Initiative of the European Commission. We will surely hear a lot about this during our panel discussion. Let me just make a few brief comments. The landscape of space actors is changing in the telecom era, in the telecom field, as we are entering a new era. There are new approaches, new frequency band, optical communications, quantum technologies that allow for the development of new products and new services. And the European Union can harness this momentum with a technology that is key to make the EU fit for the digital age, with the Secure Connectivity Initiative, based on resilient and ultra-secure space and ground systems. With this, the European Union can aim at put an end to the dead zones that still exist in Europe, which is key for cohesion in all European Union regions. But also can be a very important tool in our neighborhood policy with our direct neighbors of the European Union. Now, secure connectivity will be key to ensure the resilience of communications and to ensure as well that the European Union does not depend on non-EU systems for these crucial applications. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Da Costa. I think that this actually sets the scene for our discussion that I'm very happy to open right now. And the topic of our session, as I said, is which leverage European space infrastructure for the new digital age. And actually, it's a fact that that we need to address, I would say, a number of challenges and opportunities for the space sector in the framework of this digital transformation. We know that a lot is currently going on in the sector with the transformation of the historical business of geostationary satellites, with the advent of mega constellations on the other side of the ocean in particular, with the project pushed at the moment by the European Union for secure connectivity infrastructure, but also with the further deployment of OneWeb, which is developing quite dramatically these days. And I would say all these transformations offer a number of new opportunities, but at the same time pose a number of challenges to Europe and require strong and stringent decisions to be made in order to define how Europe will position itself in the future in this sector and how it will be able to take advantage of these transformations. So to discuss this exciting question, or these exciting questions, because there are a number of them, I have the privilege to be supported by a very prestigious panel composed of Mr. Rodrigo da Costa, who will join the panel and with whom we will be very happy to further elaborate on these issues. We have Elodie Viau, who is Director for Telecommunications at the European Space Agency. We have Guillaume Delabrosse, who is now Head of Unit at the European Commission, DigiDefis, in charge of space innovation, startups and economics, and it will be a lot about that today. We have Mr. Wolfgang Rohrig, who is Head of Information Security Unit, Capability, Armament and Planning Directorate at the European Defence Agency, with whom we will be able to address a number of security-related issues. We have David Bertolotti, Director of International and Institutional Affairs at Eutelsat, and I'm sure we will have plenty of questions for you and for the current, I would say, intentions and projects that Eutelsat is pushing forward. And last but not least, we'll have Mr. Nicolas Capet, who is CEO and founder of Anywaves, and we are very curious to know more about your activities and your prospects for the future. But to start with and initiate the discussion with you, I would like maybe to get back to you, Mr. Da Costa. So we heard some of the high-level concerns that you expressed, and definitely you mentioned the secure connectivity, and behind this notion of secure connectivity, there is, I would say, the concern of security. And maybe I would like to ask you one question, which I would say is overarching and encompasses all the current ongoing activities of the EU Space Program Agency. What are your major concerns regarding the security of the infrastructure that you are in charge of as Executive Director of the ESPI?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the question. I mean, let me start by saying that security is intrinsic in the EU space program. It is a very important element, and it is a very important element. I think by two reasons. The first one, and I think we all know, and the general public is starting to be aware of that. A lot in our daily life, a lot of our economy depends on space and depends on EU space. And obviously we expect that the EU space services continue to be delivered and continue to be delivered in a resilient manner. And therefore it is important that those services and the infrastructure that is providing those services is secured against threats, against cyber and physical threats that are out there. Because indeed, a lot of our economy depends on Galileo, a lot of our economy depends on EGNOS, a lot of our economy depends, of course, on Copernicus as well. So there is a very important intrinsic value, and those services need to be resilient. The second very important aspect is there are users that, by their particularity, and here in particular, the governmental users, require secured services. For example, in Galileo, we are already delivering today the public regulated service, and we will be further evolving that service, which is fundamental for governmental users. And those may come, of course, police officers, fire department, civil protection, but also users in the defense sector. And therefore, as you can imagine, security is fundamental. Security is really in the center of the EU space program. In terms of concerns, naturally, there is a lot of attention on EU space, and there is a lot of attention on Galileo, there is attention on EGNOS, there is attention on Copernicus. Obviously, whenever there is attention, there is eventuality or possibility of eventual threats, and the more the threats, the more secure the systems need to be. So I believe that security is already today, but will continue being a very, very important element of everything we do in space, and in particular of EU space.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm quite sure that we will have many opportunities to get back to this security concern and how to approach that. But I would say, in order to deal with the security and with the rest, I would say, of your activities, you need to interact with a number of European institutions. So, as a new player, you need to find your place in this complex game among European institutions. So, how do you interact with other institutions, European institutions involved in space affairs, and what concretely do you expect from them?
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, our mission at ESPI is threefold. It's the provision of the navigation services, so provision of Galileo and provision of EGNOS services. The security of EU space, it's one of the missions with the security accreditation, but also the operation of all the components of the space program, but also the security, operational security of Galileo and EGNOS, and the Galileo security monitoring that we do 24/7. And last, but equally important, everything that is related to the market uptake, market development, fostering of innovation, creation of a downstream of EU space, Galileo and EGNOS, but also the commercial use of Copernicus and other activities that will come our way. Now, obviously, we do not do this alone. We do this in partnership, and the partnership, well, is defined in the space regulation itself and has been now, let's say, finalized in the frame of an agreement that we have with the European Commission and the European Space Agency, clearly setting the interfaces, the responsibilities, and how we work together. For me, obviously, the partnership of the European Commission is extremely important. The European Commission is the EU Space Program Manager. We work very closely with the Commission on a daily basis on basically all of our activities, and as well the work we do with the European Space Agency, in particular on Galileo and on EGNOS, where we have established a working relationship and the new governance that comes with the framework, financial framework partnership agreement. So this partnership is extremely important. But it's not only between Commission, ESPI and ESA. It's also the way we work with industry, because everything we do, or a lot of the things we do, they are done together with industry. Obviously, we work with the upstream industry to develop the systems. We do this, by the way, in very close coordination with the European Space Agency. We work naturally with what we call the middle stream, so the operators, the people that operate Galileo, the people that operate EGNOS 24/7 in all the control centers, the Galileo control centers, the mission control centers, the ground stations, etc., etc., and with the downstream. And for the downstream here, it is particularly important to foster the innovation through the Horizon Europe program and the activities we have in partnership with the Commission on the Cassini initiative. So as you see, ESPI is working, but is not working alone. The principle is a principle of working in partnerships.
Okay, so while you were speaking, I noticed that Olivio and Guillaume Delapose were nodding their heads, so I guess that it means that they were agreeing with what you were saying. And this is a nice transition towards our next speaker. So, Elodie Viau, so you are director for telecommunications at ESA, and ESA has a very let's say structuring mission or structuring impact on the European space industry in the sector of telecoms. So, from your perspective, how do you see the future of the space telecom sector, and what are, according to you, the challenges and opportunities ahead for the European telecom sector industry?
Thanks a lot for this question. Yes, I was nodding because it's a true partnership between the various entities. And thanks for your question about the future, because the future is already here. So first of all, I want to reinforce the importance of the data, that we are now at space that is entering the data economy. So we are really more and more in a digital economy, and we have shifted from a space more focusing traditionally in the telecommunication and integrated application domain on the video, towards the importance of the data that is all around us. So the data is our electricity, and the connectivity is our distribution network. And that's why it's so important that this distribution network is resilient, robust, and always permanent, to be able to connect the links amongst all of us. We want to have the data, we want to be connected all the time, everywhere. So now we are, as was mentioned by Rodrigo, that we have humankind that is en route for bridging the digital divide. We have seen during the COVID, for example, it was very important for the social link to be able to still interact, telework, having the access to the telemedicine. And this is opening a full field of numerous applications that can be really developed over the coming years. So there is a lot of innovation, and Europe is very entrepreneur mindset. So we have, for example, as the European Space Agency, more than 1,000 startups that we are working with through our business incubation center, but we are also working in partnership throughout the full ecosystem. We were talking about upstream, middle stream, and downstream, coming from the manufacturer, the infrastructure, the operator, and the service developer. So the full ecosystem needs to work in partnership in order to address the future of the telecommunication. So this future is driven by the software-driven approach for reconfigurable satellite, recently launched Quantum Eutelsat, and we have also more and more 5G and 6G services that has been developed by our partner. We are also looking at partnering and developing applications with the industry that will impact the daily life of our citizens. So Europe needs a strong space sector. That's my second point. That's why we are working together with the European Space Agency, together to support the ambitions of the European Commission, and together with the European Union Space Program Agency, in order to address and to support our industry to further growth, have competitiveness, and expand their market. So there is really a lot of ongoing innovation. We are there to support, as the European Space Agency, the entrepreneur and the startup, and to drive the new development, not only financially, but also technically. So there is the support that is extremely important of the public to support financially, and to come there to complement and to do a snowball effect between the private and the public financing. So I will finish that by saying that the Telecom Directorate and the Integrated Application Directorate that I'm leading is really looking at a partnership project fostering this competitiveness of the full ecosystem.
Okay, so I guess your message is conveyed to all our audience today. But talking about digital divide, with the development of 5G, 6G, the space segment, telecommunication segment, is poised to be increasingly integrated with the terrestrial networks into a global telecommunications infrastructure. And as every major innovation, this comes along with a number of challenges in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of technological non-dependence, in terms of digital sovereignty. What are your views on that?
Yes, that's true that nowadays the space and terrestrial sectors are becoming seamlessly integrated. We have been doing an extraordinary progress for the regulation and the standard going to the 5G that really include now in the next generation, in the next release, the non-terrestrial elements. So the space is entering this domain. And this is even further going to be further developed through the 6G that will see the arrival of artificial intelligence within this domain. So space is going to further collaborate with the terrestrial network. And I think that's where it's very important that now we are going from space towards the terrestrial and up to the end user and his data. And therefore, it's very important that we are developing a European broadband constellation. So the European Space Agency is a strong advocate of the European design, manufacture and control multi-orbit satellite constellation. We welcome the ambition expressed by the European Commission and the Commissioner Breton for the EU to invest in a major program together with the industry, because the telecommunication domain in Europe is very much driven by private actors. And so the importance to build a secure and autonomous European satellite infrastructure for connectivity using the new technology and the innovative that the European Space Agency will, with the partner, develop and validate through like quantum and artificial intelligence technology that I was mentioning. So this system can provide additional resiliency and availability during moments of crises, or like the COVID or the other crises that can be linked, like the next challenge, like the climate that you were mentioning and that you have been discussed yesterday. So we have really this important point to be developed together and together with our industry. Nowadays, when we talk about data, we cannot forget cybersecurity. So the cybersecurity threats are increasing. For example, in 2020, the World Economic Forum ranked the cyber attacks among the 10 global risks. So, for example, cyber espionage operation, we should know that it put at risk more than 60 billion in economic growth and up to 289,000 jobs in the EU. So this is a real economical impact of those threats. And therefore, using space together with the terrestrial to be more robust, to be more resilient, and to develop a solution like quantum key distribution that can reinforce and make sure that all our network on the ground can be robust in terms of crisis or under threat. So that's where space is one more element, one more tool that we can put up front to solve the daily problem and to make sure that we are resilient to these difficulties and attack. So within the European Space Agency, it's our mission to really leverage space for our economy, for our industry and for our society. So we will support this private and public partnership in a new way. We can be not only the designer or the facilitator or the engineering support, but also the customer of the entrepreneur and the ecosystem.
Well, thank you very much for your detailed reply to this question. There are a few things that I guess we'll have the opportunity to come back later on, I hope. Now, I would like to turn to our next speaker. So, Mr. Delabros, so you are today representing the European Commission, and actually the two speakers before you, they have made mention of this elephant in the room, which is the project which is put forward by Commissioner Breton of a European mega constellation for secure connectivity. So could you please tell us more about the rationale behind this proposal, and maybe explain to us how it fits within the European or the EU connectivity and digital agenda?
Jean-Jacques, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here with you today. And I think there are 5 points I'd like to highlight first, trying to explain the rationale for this initiative pushed by the Commissioner Breton. One is anticipation. Anticipation. I think Elodie mentioned the digital economy, Rodrigo the digital age. I'm going to mention the digital decade. So we're entering that age, that decade, where connectivity will be the fuel of our economy, of the society. When you think about automated cars, Internet of Things, connectivity will be everywhere. So anticipating means that we need to have in place the means and capabilities to provide that service to the economy that our citizens will live in the coming years. So that's why anticipation is key. We are anticipating that demand. 2, challenge is resilience. So second keyword is resilience. And here we have 2 challenges when it comes to resilience. One is non-dependency. I mean, of course, connectivity will be a critical asset, will be a critical infrastructure. So the question is the extent of which we want or not to be dependent on non-EU players for that critical asset. And second challenge is the robustness of that infrastructure. I mean, Elodie mentioned the importance of cyber. We need, of course, an infrastructure that will be ultra robust, very resilient, because cyber is the new battlefield. Third point is about added value. There are already constellations in the sky, LEO constellations. There are projects in the pipeline. So what we need to think about is how we can make a difference with this new European initiative. And here I like to mention three points. One is security by design. We want to be able to provide secure services for government, and we need to embed security by design in some part of the project. Second added value will be the multi-orbital constellation, and here what's behind is cost efficiency. And the third added value is public-private partnership, the PPP, and it's very important to open a new business opportunities for commercial players. Fourth element I like to mention is that we want that project to be kind of new space flagship. We really want to embed new space actors from day one of the project to ensure that we are innovation driven. And here we want to tap into the ideas, into the skills of the new space players. We want to ensure that they will be actors of that initiative. And it's up to us, and Elodie mentioned that as well, to be sure that we will play with innovative public procurements, that we will see the extent of which we can be anchor customer when it comes to that new project as well. And the last element is fresh start. I'd like to mention. I mean, we have a fresh start, a new start in our relationship with the European Space Agency, and we want that project to become a kind of example of what we can achieve together with between the Commission, European Space Agency, and ESPI, of course. So one of the 5 points I was willing to mention as an introduction.
Well, thank you very much for your reply. But I noticed that it's a lot about however we call it, sovereignty, digital autonomy, non-dependency. There is no consensus on the way we should call it. But it's basically a lot about that. In this respect, do you think that this project of a mega constellations would qualify as the next EU critical infrastructure. And is this concern of critical infrastructure evenly shared among the EU member states?
Yes, I mean, to me, it will be a critical infrastructure. As I said, connectivity will be the backbone of our society, of our economy. So if we don't pay attention to connectivity, we put at risk the hospitals, we put at risk the financial sector, we put at risk the way our governments will be functioning. So this is why it's going to be a critical asset. And that's why it's important to have that security by design very well thought in the system. We are running a study to really define the architecture of the system. We have identified a certain number of use cases, and many are critical. So we really need to have that in mind when designing the architecture of this system. This is widely shared by member states, of course, and everybody is aware that we're entering into that digital economy. Everybody is aware of the importance of data. So this is equally shared by member states, that there is a demand for such a constellation. Of course, I mean, it's a co-construction, and we're having that dialogue with member states to explain, to take their views into account. We will enter into a kind of legislative process to really define the legal basis of this new project. So there will be long consultation with member states, but today member states are positively predisposed to go ahead with that initiative, which is quite positive. And what they see is that we will provide a service to them as government. We will provide a service to citizens across Europe, and that's why there is a positive echo across Europe vis-à-vis this project.
Thank you. No, good to hear that you have such a strong support from the EU member states. Maybe we will discuss finance a bit later in our discussion. But now I would like to turn to our next speaker. So, Mr. Wolfgang Rohring, you are representing the European Defence Agency, and surprisingly, before you, you had all civilian organizations have been extensively addressed security-related concerns, and I think that, I don't know if you have still anything to add to that. I hope yes. And more precisely, and especially also further elaborating on this project of the European Commission, how far is the European Defence Agency involved in the development, in the definition of the requirements of this project, from both governmental and, more specifically, military usage, that you are the only one being able to address today?
Yes, Jean-Jacques, thank you for the question, and also thank you for being here, having the opportunity to present EDA in this panel, which it is addressing European ambitions and solutions for secure connectivity, digital transformation, and technological sovereignty. And here, clearly, defense issues are always tackled. Therefore, I want to twist a little bit your question and go from the would, so that is already a decision taken, into a could, to change it. How could EDA contribute to this? Because there are no decisions taken yet formally, and there are still many questions relevant for discussion. So when I look at it from a purely military capability perspective and capability requirements perspective, clearly space-based communication and information services have to be confirmed by our member states as a capability development priority for the coming years. That means that space, like already mentioned, cyberspace, is of crucial importance and a vital enabler for any kind of military operations, being it land operations, air operations, or Navy operations. And in addition to that, space is on its way to be understood from the military perspective as an own domain of operations. NATO already went this step formally, and that further underlines the relevance of space for defense. This relevance has also been confirmed by our ministers with their decision to address defense in space as a so-called focus area, as an outcome of the first full cycle of the coordinated annual review of on defense. And because there it was identified that cooperation on space is most pressing, very promising, and also most needed to ensure a better coherence on the capabilities available for the military. That means space definitely, and all, including space-based communications, to receive a high attention at the defense level. And we are fully aware that primarily the music, when we talk about EU on this, beside our member states, that this is playing in the Commission with all the different initiatives here. And that so far, when we look back into history, here the military always had a very limited voice. And this is for sure our hope that this for the new projects and programs may change a little bit. But coming back to your question and secured connectivity, this is primarily for sure all about SATCOM. And in our latest EDA magazine, we clearly addressed no SATCOM, no operations. Therefore, we are fully reliant on the availability of any kind of satellite communications, being it in the theater with, for example, UHF SATCOM, or with the reach back home. So this is one of the things. And now coming to the practical aspects. EDA since 2009 has here practical experience with, in the beginning, only purely provision of commercial SATCOM services in our EU SATCOM market project, and for almost 3 years now in our EDA, and here I stress EDA GovSatcom demonstration project. With this, we already pool governmental SATCOM services and provide them to our member states who need them. And the main objective of this project is for sure also, beside providing the service, to collect experience about practicalities, risks and benefits with EU GovSatcom. So in view of the EU GovSatcom project, this is something we can provide, and this experience I think is very beneficial. And one of the things is also our expectation that, for example, the mega constellation will primarily build on the EU GovSatcom project, where we are already in the dialogue with the Commission and contribute our input when it comes to security requirements and others. To bring it to the point, oh no, I want to add another point, also not to be forgotten. That at the same way we are also cooperating quite well with the European Space Agency already for years in the SATCOM area, and also in their recent or new space system for safety and security initiative. So this is also one of the things which need to be converged somehow or to be coherent in the very end. Especially when I look into our analysis when it comes to defense in space, I think we can provide more support to the Commission in this huge ambition to have these complementary requirements. And this, for sure, should also be reflected somehow in the governance model for such a solution. Because when we look into the past for many things, when it comes to security, often a defense posture was finally adopted or based on the defense experience. And it's our firm belief that for sure space is a dual-use domain, and therefore also this mega constellation should be somehow dual-use and should build on our experience, as I already mentioned, we have with our two projects, where by accident today we were able to have enough signatures that the EDA GovSatcom demonstration project, the duration is extended for 3 more years. But that it should be on this question at the moment.
Okay, congratulations for that. But you mentioned the dual-use nature of space and the defense posture, which in the and might be adopted, also the complementarity of the civilian versus military approach. And actually, the previous speakers have addressed security concerns, but you talked about threats, which is more purely military language. But what are your major concerns when it comes to considering these future critical infrastructure? What are your major concerns in terms of threats, or in terms of, I would say, resilience of the systems to face this threats that you have in mind, and what you believe will need to be specifically addressed by an agency like EDA, in addition or in complementarity to what the civilian agency will have done before you?
Well, here I want to primarily focus on the cyber aspects, because that's for me safe ground as I'm coming out of this area. And one of the main mantras out of the cyber world is that any piece of electronics where a bit of information is handled can be attacked. It can never be 100% secure. Information security is a theoretical state where we strive for, but we will never reach it. And therefore, looking from this angle, that everything where IT is built in can be attacked, and transposing this into space missions, the attack surface is quite vast and includes at least the entire ground infrastructure, as well as the launches in all the space segments, including their organic systems, starting from the propulsion system, power management, up to the specific mission payload. So it's vast, and I don't want to go out of this discussion leaving the impression this cannot be protected. One of the sayings we have in German, how to eat an elephant, and that's slice by slice. And I think that's also where we have how we have to address cyber security, cyber defense in the space domain. So let's start to slice a little bit the elephant here. And you already mentioned the threat is important. So already Sun Tzu, every military has to quote Sun Tzu, knew that it's important to understand your enemy. And this is also in the modern cyber world not different. Therefore, an understanding of their motivation, their objectives, their capabilities, their skills are important for us to understand. Motivations are difficult to judge, but at least the objectives when it comes to attacks on cyber elements, we can sort a little bit along a very traditional module, and that's the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, availability. So this we can also look into the different space missions. So when I look in SATCOM and space situation awareness, most probably an attacker will try to compromise the availability and confidentiality of the information there. While for a PNT mission, maybe more the integrity of the signal is the target. So jamming is annoying and it's a nuisance, but the manipulation and spoofing of the signal, that's the much bigger threat. Therefore, this is one of the things how we can address this. And Guillaume was already addressing the aspect security by design. But I think even there we have to go the step further, or go a step back still, because that's the thing of the security of the supply chain. I can have a very well-designed space segment, but if I'm not able to trust in the different components because they are coming from everywhere in the world, I think that's one of the things to be also take a look, and into the entire life cycle of a space segment. So even the decommissioning phase might be a risk that somebody, an unfriendly takeover will take place of a satellite, and it's suddenly steered in the orbit of another satellite. So these are things to be addressed here. And for sure, the aspect of the combination of cyber attacks with other attacks, like an electromagnetic attack. So to have not only a hybrid meeting, but also a hybrid attack path, so that the attacker is coming from different angles. Maybe to hide the true attack, or to have effects from both sides. And the last aspect I want to mention is here. I'm coming out of the cyber domain. We discussed over lunch the thing. I sometimes feel 10 years back in the cyber world, and here we are currently in the United Nations in the discussions of the cyber world on what are the elements of responsible state behavior in cyberspace. And I think something similar will rather sooner than later take place, or has to take place, also when it comes to space. In this dual use understanding of civil usage and military usage at the same time. Thanks a lot.
No, thank you very much, Wolfgang. So it's basically a lot about cyber security as the top priority for you to see with you here. And thank you, by the way, for the German recipe on how to cook an elephant. I didn't know it. I will make sure to remember this one next time. So now, okay, we have heard now the four representatives of institutions and public sector. Now we also have the chance to have with us two representatives of the private sector. And maybe I would like to start with David Bertolotti, representing Eutelsat. Actually, as we have discussed, with a lot of new things are happening in the space sector, but still Eutelsat is extensively relying on the geostationary satellite business. So and this domain actually represents a lot of interests in for Europe and for European manufacturing industry in particular. So my first question to you would be to ask you to tell us how you see the future of the GeoSatcom markets, the GeoSatcom sector, and the place of Europe in this.
Well, thank you very much, Jean-Jacques, for having me in this panel, which is also a nice opportunity to see in the flesh familiar faces on Zoom. So for once, it's a very nice change. Well, you're right to say that as the French and not German saying goes, you shouldn't throw the baby with the bathwater, and there's still room for geo assets. I would say that they are very likely to remain in the foreseeable future, in the medium term, the good workhorse of the industry, in the sense that they represent a very good solution for consumer broadband, thanks to their compelling price-value proposition. And let me get a little bit into the details of this. A first aspect is that we've now reached, thanks to technology improvements, we've reached very good performances with geo systems, up to 100 megabits in download. So that allows us to bring to end users, to consumers, performances and a sort of a user experience that is comparable to some terrestrial solutions, and that at a competitive price, both on the service side, and that's particularly true with the new VHTS systems. And as you know, we are bringing one soon in our fleet, but also, which shouldn't be forgotten, on the terminal side, on the user terminal. That's one of the big advantages today compared to what you have on the market for LEO. The user terminal is affordable, I would say. A second important point when you look at the future of the market is that the extension of universal service obligations to connectivity for the telecom operators, the incumbents, the historical telecom operators. And so geo assets and the services offered represent for them a good solution to meet their universal service obligations, in particular in the white spots areas, which is an expression that I prefer to dead zones, because they are not dead. There are people there and companies, and they need access. And a third point that I want to highlight is that I know that the hype is with low latency, but frankly, when you look at the use cases, when you look at what people do with their internet connection, and of course, as a private company in this business, we look very closely at what people do with our capabilities. When you look at what people do, not having a low latency is not a handicap in most cases. I mean, around 70% of the volume consumed is for streaming, and frankly, streaming is relatively insensitive to low latency. So for all those reasons, the performance relative to the price, the ability to meet universal service obligations, and for the use cases, the geo still has a future. And of course, that's not to talk about the video segment, where clearly it is and will remain indispensable, but focusing on connectivity. So we see the rapport between geo and LEO more as a complementarity relationship, where LEO will be able to bring low latency if and when needed, maybe also bring extra capacity in the congested area, for instance. So that's really our vision. It's a vision of complementarity.
Well, thank you very much, and actually quite reassuring, because I must confess that on my side I was a bit anxious about the potential downturn or further downturn on this segment on the market. But now I would like to maybe ask you a question about the second elephant that we have in the room, which is the OneWeb project. So Eutelsat is involved, and I've recently even increased its shares in the OneWeb project, but it's at the same time involved in the feasibility study of the European Commission for a mega constellation that we previously mentioned. So a basic question: is there enough room for both projects in Europe?
Well, thank you for the question, Jean-Jacques, and that's a question I know that many observers and colleagues have. I mean, first of all, let me go back to the strategic vision, and in particular to what other panelists, but Guillaume in particular, outlined. I think we share the same strategic vision. I mean, our analysis is exactly the same. Even though I spoke in defense of GEO, but it's clear that there's a pivot to connectivity in the telecom market, and that this will have to rely more and more on LEO assets. That is one. And the second thing is that if anyone, in fact, wants to have a seat at the table in the LEO world, well, one would better hurry up, because there are simply physical constraints to having a seat at the table in terms of the availability and prioritization of frequencies, and in terms also just physical space and numbers that can be accommodated on more or less the same orbit. Now, what happened? Obviously, as a company, as a private operator, you would understand that we had to seize the momentum, and the time frames were not exactly the same. When when the European Commission very rightly started to lay the issue on the table of member states, I think maybe member states were still a little bit behind the curve, to be honest. And we, at our end, had to make an investment decision. And already, I mean, in a sense, the train stopped twice at the station, and that was fortunate. So we climbed at the second stop. But it was quite obvious that there wouldn't be other opportunities. And so we decided to do that. And in doing so, we believe also that we have brought a strong European element to the OneWeb adventure, together with the other partners in this, together with Airbus, together with Ariane Espace. So there's now, you can say, a very, very strong European dimension in OneWeb. Now, when it comes to the EU project, we said from the very beginning that we did not see anything incompatible. As you said, we are part of the study, and I think we're doing our fair share of work to try and also make sure that the European Commission and the Member States benefit from our experience, from our analysis. We have yet to hear in turn what exactly the Member States would like to achieve with that, what use cases they want to address, what amount of money they are prepared to put in this. That's quite a defining feature. How also they define sovereignty. Because I heard Mr. Da Costa saying that it means not depending on non-EU systems, but then the question is, up to what level in the chain? For instance, I think we all know in the business today that the ground segment is a weakness of European industry. So is there really a point in building a highly secure constellation with satellites if the ground segment is not more Europeanized in a way? So these are questions that are being addressed in the framework of the study. And similarly, the sovereignty on frequencies is also something very, very important. That was one of the attractive features of OneWeb, to be honest. It's the level of priority of their findings. And that's a very important component when you want to engage in a constellation. So we do not see any contradiction. We are looking at and we're trying also to make the case for all those important elements, the sovereignty element and its definition, the quality of the filings, of the frequencies, well, we'll see what member states decide to do with the Commission at the end of the day. We were interested to see at least that the document on the impact assessment, the Commission listed an option that referred to non-EU constellations. So again, we'll see.
Okay, thank you. We'll see if this should be or could be interpreted as an invitation. Now, thank you very much for your reply. And now I'd like to turn to our last speaker, last but not least, speaker Nicolas Capet. So you have founded this company, Anywaves, so you left CNES to create this company. Congratulations for that. And actually, what was your point? And could you please tell us more about the focus of the Anywaves and what kind of opportunities do you envisage for your company in the European space framework?
Thanks a lot, Jean-Jacques, and thank you to having invited me today. It's an honor, and yes, as you mentioned, I was working for the CNES, so the French Space Agency, with a lot of passion, because I was always convinced that space is at the benefit of citizens, obviously European citizens, but not only, because it brings a lot of things to our major future challenges. We can talk about climate, connectivity, to get access to information, education, a lot of various things, and security also to survey, and having some assets to be able to manage our planet, because we see everything is connected. We are just going out of a sanitary crisis, and I think we have realized at which point we are connected and how space is also connected. On that time, when I decided to leave CNES, it was the time where we had a lot of questions with new space. What is the new space? Something new, something different. It's something that is going to make traditional player out of the game. All that things. There were a lot of debates. For some of them, it was just something good for students to make them more capable to go into the space, traditional space industry. And for others, it was a complete game changer that was going to erase everything that was existing before. I'm sure we are now all convinced that none of these options are the reality, because what we see, and it has been said quite a lot, new space, and especially with the approach of LEO constellations, all the services it generates, is definitely complementary to what was done with more traditional space, like geo assets, etc. And definitely, in some cases, it depends on the use, it depends on the application, both are going to complete each other. This is the same for, I think, our industry, because new players having a new focus with this constellation approach, which is quite new indeed, compared to a single big satellite sent in a geostationary orbit. Now it's more industrialized, and sometimes I make the parallel with aeronautic industry, with tens, hundreds, even thousands of units a year, but with very high level of reliability, given the criticity of the applications we are doing. And I think this can be this point, and also the fact that these new players are not always coming from space. And this interconnection and complementary thing we are talking about, especially in telecom, for example, where we have to find an hybridized system capable to once manage the terrestrial connectivity, and on the other side the satellite connectivity, is going to be more and more interconnected. So when I decided to leave, to create any waves, it's to develop a new generation of equipment. So on my side, I studied antennas, I was in charge of antenna innovation at CNES, and so anyways is making antennas for satellites constellation, and we are bringing that new kind of equipment, more adapted to this new market, constellation, small satellite, but it's not the only point, it's also more capacity in terms of production and short delays in terms of production without sacrificing the reliability and the quality of the equipment, because space is something that has to be sustainable, and so low quality and extremely cheap things sent into orbit is definitely not an option from my point of view. So this was why I decided to leave the CNES. And today, so we are 4 years old, we have already delivered more than 90 flight models all over the world, so it's a big success, also with very young companies, even for example in India with Pixel, but also with traditional players like Airbus, like Thales on different programs. Why? Because our approach is benefits to them. Why? Because it's a way to be more competitive, because our prices are definitely lower than what was done. The development time is taken by ourselves. We are responsible of our products, and we invest with a mix between institutions and private investments to develop new components, new products, and we propose that to traditional players that are going to benefit from that and being even more competitive in the future. So yeah, this was the reason why I decided to do that.
No, thank you very much, and good to hear that you have such positive and promising business perspectives ahead of you. We'll closely monitor the further development of your company. But back to all these concerns expressed by the previous speakers related to security, I want also to challenge you on this. What are your major concerns as a company in terms of the strategic autonomy, or let's call it security of supply, and the other way around, in which way you believe that a company like yours could contribute to the strategic autonomy of Europe?
It's an excellent question, because I think it's a major challenge, since now space is more and more accessible to a lot of countries. It's not a small club, not anymore. It's going to be more and more players. We saw that in many different countries. And what we saw in the past is that sometimes, if you don't have some specific equipment, some specific technologies, you are not able to go to space. It's the case for launchers. This is why Europe has already stated that we need to be able to have access to space independently of any other continents. This is the question also for the future European constellation. This is also a challenge for Galileo to get this independence and this sustainability, because a lot of our European economy relies on our space assets. Regarding our vision on that, sometimes I give a very simple answer. It is that when you do business in space, it's a worldwide business. We are not addressing national business. We are not addressing only European business. We are worldwide, and especially for new space with constellation that are going to develop global services all over the world. So, as a first specification in all our developments, we need to be ITAR-free, and when it is possible, and most of the time, in our case, it is possible locally for us, we are 100% European in terms of supply chain. And I think this is something that should be more and more developed in Europe. We saw already some issues in microelectronics. It can lead to dramatic economical issues for some components that are very specific, and we are sometimes dependent on such technologies. Europe has all the capacity in terms of knowledge, in terms of industrial capability, in terms of know-how and the formation, future generation, to be independent in most of subjects. Obviously, we have to choose carefully, but I think today the subject we are discussing is one major challenge for European citizens. And maybe one point also regarding the security and the sustainability of such a constellation, because when we are going to start that, we are never going to stop, because we are going to develop an asset that is going to be something extremely useful for European citizens and its economy in terms of security, all the personal data, but all the business associated to that connectivity, and also for the economical impact of such possibilities and business developments using such big constellations. When we are going to do that, we have to be careful on the fact that, once we start one satellite, after a few years, we will have to replace it. So it's going to be a system of systems. The first satellite is not going to be the same as the last satellite of the first batch, and it will have to renew year after year. So in terms of, I would say, sustainability, new companies like us are definitely not able to manage such a big flagship alone. It's obvious because we are too young, we have not the robustness in terms of economy compared to traditional players, and this is why together we are going to be able to do that and to manage this challenge, bringing innovation that are widely supported by our institutions with EU H2020, with ESA working a lot of R&D and also at different national levels. We have to transform that and use it at the benefits of European citizens, and I'm definitely convinced that it's having this vision of a progressive iteration, evolution, complete different scheme than what was done before when you choose someone for the 15 following years, something more dynamic and having opportunities to place and test our new companies. We have helped to bring this so incredible innovation in all the value chain, launchers, applications, services, equipment, etc.
Thank you very much for your very detailed reply. Well, now I think it's time to open our Q&A session. We have still 45 minutes ahead of us and have plenty full of very interesting questions that I would like to invite you to address. So maybe the first one, maybe I would like to suggest, is about actually big constellations and about Starlink in particular. And the question is, how do you see the recent, I would say, news regarding the market development of Starlink in Europe, and how important will be the time to market for competition? Because actually, this very fast deployment of this constellation puts a lot of pressure on the European project, and how far is this time to market constraint or requirement is integrated or included or embedded in the shaping of the European project. Maybe as it's a business question, maybe I would like to start with Mr. Bertolotti.
I saw that one coming. Thank you. Well, it's certainly a fast-moving business, but I'd like to say that I mean, we, or rather OneWeb, is moving fast as well. In fact, OneWeb's constellation will be completed before Starlink is. Because at the end of this year, at the current pace of very successful launches, OneWeb will cover the entirety of the Northern Hemisphere, and the constellation will be completed by the end of next year, which will make it actually the first global constellation operational. So we definitely feel that through OneWeb we are in the race. But I'd like to say also, and I use the opportunity of having many institutions represented here, although it's not necessarily in their area of competence, strictly speaking, it's more of a national responsibility. But it shows also how much the European Union is open to outside operators. It was very easy for the one you mentioned, but also for others, to obtain all their licenses to operate, to have ground stations. And that is not necessarily the case the other way around. European operators do not always have the same ease of doing business in other geographies. So perhaps this is something we should also, think about. I'm not advocating a sort of, protectionist approach of the EU, but I think when we talk about sovereignty and autonomy, it's also good to be maybe more able to decide who we want in or not. But again, looking at the business side, yeah, definitely things are moving fast. So as I was saying before, if the European Union, if its member states want to have a seat at the table, if they want to stay in the race, they also have to move fast and make the right technological and business and managerial choices in order not to arrive too late on the market.
Yeah, thank you for your reply. And I guess, Mr. Labos, there was a kind of Mr. Bertolotti handing over the baton to you on this question. So, do you have any comments to make?
No, I mean, we fully share the diagnosis. The fact that we need to hurry up, we need to stay in the race, so there is no, I mean, we shouldn't be just a backseater here, so we want to really be one of the big players, and that's why Commissioner Breton took that bold decision to push for that initiative to be set up as soon as possible. It will take the time it will take. What we want to do is not just a one-to-one copy of what others are doing. It's what I said before. We want to play with a multi-orbital constellation because we think it's about cost efficiency. It will accelerate as well the deployment of some services. So that's why I think it's important to play with the legacy industry, with what we have. We want to plug security by design. We want to offer secure and governmental services, which will not be provided by those constellations. So what we are trying to do is, one, be a player, two, act as soon as possible, but three, something different. So have a kind of adding value and make a difference compared to the other constellations. But clearly, it's about sovereignty, so we need to act very soon. And again, that's why we have pushed, Commissioner Breton has pushed very hard for that initiative to be set up.
Thank you very much. And maybe still on Starlink, I would like to invite maybe Elodie and Costa to also maybe address the same question, maybe from a different angle, because actually Starlink is now operating in Europe. So did you make any assessment of the level of performance? How does it work? Does it work well? And do you see any challenge in really coping and keeping up with from a timeline perspective with them, but not only timeline, also in terms of level of performance?
Yes, so maybe to answer to that, so as the Open Space Agency and with our partner, we do assess the performances, the capability to know the competitive market and to support even more the innovation of our partners. So yes, I would like to echo what was said by Guillaume Delabrosse and the European Commission. It's really to say that it's not the same that is trying to be built in Europe. We try to do it in the European way as well, bringing all together all the ecosystem, including the users, because we have heard during the various talks that there is an important also at looking at the user and the various segments, including the non-space segment. We were talking about autonomous vehicles, we are talking about security and governmental actors up to military. So I think there is a challenge as well that when we are bringing those systems, and that is not necessarily just a GEO or LEO or MEO, but combination of multi-orbit capability, there is a need to also see how the user segment, the ground and terrestrial segment need to be developed and which innovative parts are needed to there. I would like to also echo what Nicolas Capel said. It's about not a one-shot. It's about the evolution. How do we introduce innovation in a new way by a step approach and an iterative approach, much more like it is done in the IT sectors, that we don't try to get everything perfect before pushing innovation in space, and innovation in space integrated with the terrestrial network. So there is a multiple aspect to be taken into account. And what we would like as institution is to support the existing players and that need to move fast. We need to be at their speed. And we need to be at the speed of the mature actors that cannot wait, but we are there to complement and to support further with them in partnership to develop the next generation of system, introducing new elements thanks to the entrepreneurial mindset that do exist in Europe.
Thank you, Silvio. And what about you, Mr. Costa? Any thoughts regarding this fast deployment of Starlink on European soil?
Yeah, thank you very much. No, I can echo what Guillaume said. I think first, how do we see the news on the development of the business? I think it's with a certain normality. I mean, it is a good idea. It is working, so there is potential for success, and this is why exactly why Europe has to do its part as well. I mean, let me just recall and make quickly the parallel that it is also due to the European ability to innovate, that the European technology know-how, the technological know-how, that Europe has been able, for example, of developing Galileo. And Galileo today is better performing than GPS and is better performing than all the other systems, better performing than GLONASS, better performing than Beidou. And of course, in order for Galileo to stay this well performing, exactly what Elodie was mentioning, that we will need to bring innovation into the loop, and the second generation of Galileo is going into that direction, step by step, in a system of systems where you have at the same time satellites from the previous generation, satellites from the new generation, working together to provide services. We have this experience in Galileo, and clearly when it comes to secure connectivity, the potential is there. We have everything from the technological point of view, from the innovation capability point of view. We have what we need to have in order to move forward. The point of doing other things, doing things differently from what others do. I think here in particular, and I've mentioned it in my keynote, I think we need to be particularly attentive as well to the governmental users. They will play an important role. They will not be the unique users by far, but they will play an important role because there is a need. The need is there, and this need needs to be answered also from an institutional way.
Well, thank you very much for your replies. Now I have a next question, which is about the deployment of mega constellations. Again, it raises a lot of interest, and actually the pressure that it creates on the space resources. So, namely the debris in the lower orbits, and also the spectrum. So I would like maybe, I think that on this topic there is I would say room for replies from everybody, and I would like to go around the table, maybe starting with you, Mr. de la Brosse. How far has these aspects integrated into the requirements of the system? To you, Mr. da Costa, is this a criteria or a parameter that the EU Space Program Agency is getting prepared to handle in the future? To Elodie, how is the Space Agency now integrating that in the design of their future projects and programs? To Mr. Capet, will a new generation of antennas offer new perspectives for the optimization of the use of the available spectrum? To Mr. Roig, what about, once again, do you see the proliferation of debris as a threat for the continuity of your operations? And what about frequencies? We know that the militaries have some reserved frequencies for their operations. And to Mr. Bertolotti, how far are the private operators ready to include that and to take charge of I would say, ensuring proper behavior in space in their operations, their current operations? So if it's fine with you, I will start with Mr. de la Brosse.
Thank you very very much. No, I mean, this issue about the space debris is a concern today. It's going to be a growing concern, of course, in the coming years with the deployment of LEO constellations. And as you know, there is already, I would say, some pilot initiatives at European level with a consortium bringing together some member states, whereby we get intelligence on risk of collision, for instance. We want to build further. That commission wants to build further and to develop what we call the space traffic management. So we will put on the table early next year an initiative to build up more capacities and technologies, to develop standards, and to team up with international partners on this particular concern. So there will be a big initiative next year to really put in place a European initiative, because, as I said, it's a matter of concern and it will increase in the coming years.
Yeah, if I may, just maybe picking up on some elements that you mentioned, Jean-Jacques, and also some elements from Guillaume's intervention. I mean, the sustainability of what we do in space is fundamental. If space is fundamental, we need to do it in a sustainable way. This is quite logic, and I mean, we had this experience not long ago, maybe a couple of months ago. We had to maneuver a Galileo satellite because there was a debris approaching, which posed a certain level of risk to that particular satellite, so we had to get the satellite out of the way. And this is not something that is really that uncommon. I mean, it happens, or it happened in Galileo. Surely it happens as well with other systems. And indeed, for Europe to have that capability of being aware of what is around our critical infrastructures, our critical systems that are in space, is extremely important. It's really something of added value. We are exchanging with the European Commission on space situational awareness at large, and how can ESPI, working together with the European Union, also contribute to that from our point of view. So clearly, whatever we do in space, and also in the case of secure connectivity, whatever we do in space, we need to be very attentive at the sustainability of that, because, as it was said before, once you do the first, we will stay there for a long time, and we need to be sure that we can stay there for a long time.
Yes, so I think when we were discussing doing it European way, not doing it necessarily the same way as others are doing in other continents, sustainability is key for Europe. We have really a strong willingness to approach space in a sustainable way. So at the European Space Agency, we have clear space with in the Adrios program, where the European Space Agencies position themselves as a customer of a company. And it has been developed in one of our business incubation centers, exactly like any wave long time ago now. And this is showing that we can do also differently, and having this system will grab big objects. But having this capability, we are also encouraging other initiatives. Typically in our partnership project with OneWeb to develop 5G commercial services, we have also partnering with Astro Lab, which is Astroscale, which is also a company that developed new methodology for inside the design of the satellite, already include elements to be able to really approach the constellation in a sustainable way. So we are supporting multiple initiatives because we want to develop that in a more competitiveness of the industry. And I think during the discussions that we have for secure connectivity, the sustainability of the system of systems is going to be well taken into account. We are not going to stop only at the satellite. We are going to look at the launcher and how we can make our launcher even more sustainable and looking at the more like green. And I think this is key, because when we are addressing the climate change and the challenge that are coming further, we also want to use space as an element that can bring sustainability in space and from space.
Thank you. So, what about you, Mr. Kepi? What about frequencies?
Frequencies, it's pretty rare. It's pretty expensive. But hopefully we are very creative. There are new systems with all the multi-beams aspects that are now widely used to increase our efficient use of the spectrum, and there are also future possibilities using higher frequencies like QV bands and even TRIMs, and even if we go further through optics, and I'm definitely convinced that we will be able to manage hybridization of all these telecommunication systems using the frequency spectrum. Obviously, there is also another risk. It is that terrestrial players are looking a lot for space frequencies with huge means, so we also have to be careful that we are able to protect these frequencies for space application, because space is becoming more and more used, especially in telecom, and maybe one day this full convergence between ground segments and the space segments. So yeah, it's pretty rare. We have a lot of things to manage it, I would say, in a reasonable manner with the ITU in order to allow interoperable systems, not making them some jamming or that kind of things, but it's a real subject for a long time.
Okay. So no solution to propose.
Yes, we can increase the frequencies. Also, it's question of capability at the end, because when you have a given frequency bands, bringing new solutions, for example, new antenna solution, new amplification solution, new electronic solutions, you are able, using the same thing, to create a lot of more data rates. And this is the way we are evolving. We manage the same resource, but we make it 10 times, 100 times more efficient. So it's some kind of ecological way to use the same resource, because we have a fixed resource, which are the frequencies, and we are able to find new ways, new systems to make it more and more efficient. And from a pure theoretical point of view, there is no limit. It's a technological capability we have to develop to answer these needs.
Well, I'm happy to hear that there are no limits. I'd like to hear that more often. So, what about you, Mr. Roy?
Well, for sure, physics cannot be banned, so there are some limitations. And I also don't want to dwell on the aspect that for sure most of the modernization, especially in communications, in the last 30 years was on the expenses of previously military reserved frequencies and bands. So that's already an own panel you can do here. But for sure, one of the things also you learn in the military is from the beginning, everything can be turned into a weapon, and therefore any avoidance of debris in any way is to give a potential adversary a lower chance to turn something into a weapon. And here, now I'm not looking at it from a military perspective, but as an MBA, with each decommissioning or deorbiting of a satellite, we burn a lot of money. And I think therefore anything where we are able to extend the life cycle of a space segment through in-space servicing, and I know ESA is doing here a lot of great research, is for the benefit of the user and burning less money by deorbiting. Therefore, this is clearly one of the things to be further followed and expanded.
Thank you very much. And what about you, Mr. Bertolotti? What about the use of spectrum made by these mega constellations project? Is it really creating problems? And then the debris. You are really in a position to address both.
Yeah, you raised indeed two very important topics that are closely related, but at the same time different: spectrum and debris. On spectrum, I mean, first of all, I fully agree with what Mr. Capet said regarding the need to protect the bandwidth for SATCOMs from encroachments by terrestrial operators. That's even before we start thinking about the mega constellation, but that's a constant threat for our industry. Let's be clear. But on the spectrum and the mega constellations, I can only repeat what I said earlier. Priority filings are a very rare resource, and some players have clearly grabbed interesting positions already. And frankly, I'm not sure that all member states, for instance, within the EU have fully realized this. But clearly, constellations raise huge coordination problems, both between themselves and between the assets in LEO and the existing assets in GEO. And one thing that we will have to see, because it's only the beginning of the experience, is whether the existing coordination mechanisms, in particular with the ITU, work or not in case of harmful interference. So we have yet to see that. But I think certainly from a European perspective, we should really reinforce this role of the multilateral system, of the existing framework, and not, as it is gradually developing today, not let those disputes being resolved in front of one single national regulator, which is not a European one. On debris, it's long been a preoccupation of the industry. Actually, the first debris mitigation plan of Eutelsat dates back to 2005. But of course, in the LEO world and in the constellation world, it's even more acute. In our view, we need three things that the previous speakers have mentioned in a way or another. We need SSA, space situational awareness. We need, as much as possible, common rules of the road. And we need more, I would say, economical remediation measures. On the SSA, I won't repeat what Guillaume said. Efforts are underway. But again, from a sovereignty perspective, it's very important that the European Union, its operators, can have an accurate picture of the situation and do not rely on an outside single source. On rules of the road, we really need genuine commitments from the new actors and not a trust us, everything's going to be all right kind of approach. And if possible, we need also those rules to be binding on everyone. One of the difficulties we have at the moment is that some operators falling under some national legislations do respect some very stringent rules and practices, and that's very good. But not everyone is in that situation, because not all states have the good national space laws. So that's and certainly today this is something that has to be looked at the European level. It's the more relevant, I would say, level. And the third thing on remediation measures, and in particular active debris removal and or in-orbit servicing, that's of course very interesting, very promising. But what is key is to demonstrate that it's commercially viable. For us, typically today, that's the question we have. Will it be commercially viable? Will it be affordable? Or again, will it remain something extremely expensive that will be made compulsory only for a few actors, usually the big names, and will others go scot-free because anyway they can't afford it? So that's a question, and we are hopeful that all the studies underway will eventually lead to something that, again, will be affordable and used.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we still have time to take a couple more. I have a very good one, which is, what do you think of the way Starlink behaves in space? Could this serve, or should this serve as a model for upcoming European operators of mega constellations? And if no, in which way should they do better? like to start with this one? Mr. Da Costa, maybe? No? Yeah,
No, again, I don't think that any of us here is here to assign the blame on anyone in particular, and it very much goes back to the discussion we just had on debris. I mean, we have to make sure that all actors behave responsibly, follow some clear rules, which means also that the rules of behavior, I mean, until such time we have common norms for everyone, that the rules that are followed by each actor are transparent, are known. So for instance, when a player says, I have a policy to avoid collisions, I have a policy to mitigate debris creation, well, we should be able to see that policy, to understand, to discuss it openly. Same thing for frequency coordination. I mean, there should be a free-flowing exchange. We've been doing this between geo operators for years, for decades. We should be able to do the same with the LEO players. So again, it's not totally a blank slate. We've been doing things that have proven to work well in the other orbits. We should be able to emulate that in the other orbits.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bertolotti. Elodie, who would like to react on this one as well?
Yes, I think the key question is how do we develop the tool and the innovation in order to be able to even further address those issues? Because as mentioned, making debris removal commercially sustainable and commercially viable, also developing techniques that those constellations do not prevent, for example, astronomy observation. So we need to develop, there is a lot of innovation that need to be put in place. There is a field of artificial intelligence that can be used also for collision avoidance. So those technologies are not there at the very, very start. Need to be deployed, need to be matured, and that's where the public institution, like the European Space Agency or like the European Commission facilitating the regulation and making sure the rules are respected and in place, can play a role to support the private sectors that we are hearing wants to develop and want to develop in a sustainable way worldwide. So I think what our role is to play as a European player to lead the way towards this sustainability that can be taken globally over the world, right?
Thank you, Elodie. Next one is about the strong, I would say, focus that we made today on security of supply, especially in the first part of our discussion. And the question is about the balance between security of supply and international cooperation, collaboration. So this is, should we set a limit to our search for autonomy and security of supply, and in which way might this, I would say, endanger or challenge our capacity to continue, I would say, our collaboration in space with other non-European space powers. Yeah, Mr. Da Costa.
Yeah, thank you very much. The first thing is autonomy and collaboration are not words in contradiction. And I think this is very important. Today, again, let's look at what exists already today as the EU infrastructure in space. Let's look at both Galileo and Copernicus. Galileo is autonomous, in the sense it provides a solution without resourcing to other systems, so it is autonomous, but it is collaborating. It is collaborating in the sense that nowadays, if Galileo and GPS signals are available, the receivers we have in our pockets, our cell phones, they use satellites from Galileo and from GPS in order to calculate a more precise positioning. This is what we call the multi-constellation receivers, which is the vast majority. However, in the situation where one of those is not available, in the situation where GPS suddenly is not available anymore, those receivers will be able of calculating the positioning the same using Galileo. So our telephones, the navigation in our mobile phones, in our cars will continue working. This is autonomy. Let's look at Copernicus. Nowadays, you will see that if there is a natural catastrophe or natural disaster anywhere in Europe, and actually anywhere in the world, one of the first things you are going to see in a newspaper is a picture from Copernicus. Because we are using pictures from Copernicus, of course, for our civil protection, but the European Union is collaborating around the world with civil protections all around the world and providing those pictures also to other countries. So even though we are autonomous in Copernicus, we are collaborating through Copernicus. So these two notions, I think it's very important first to be clear that autonomy and collaboration, international collaboration, are not two things that contradict each other. Then the second question comes, is what it means to be autonomous and how far does our autonomy go? Well, autonomous means exactly that. It means being able of providing the services, of providing, of building the systems in a way where the European Union is not dependent from third parties in whatever is critical. And here, I think our regulators, our legislators, have done very good work, both in the previous legal framework, but also on the current one, in the space regulation. It's very clearly defined what is autonomy, and in particular on what it concerns supply chain, and where are the situations where actually we do not need to be completely independent from sources in third countries.
No, thank you, Mr. Agassi. Yeah, Mr. Ramos.
No, I just want to echo first what Rodrigo said. I mean, basically that there is no contradiction in terms between sovereignty and international cooperation, and you can see at European level we even have developed that new concept of open strategic autonomy. So it means what it means. But you know that there is plenty of work when it comes to trying to identify the weak points in the value chains. Where are we dependent, and the level of criticality needs. We have, for many years now, a well-established work between the Commission, the European Space Agency, the European Defence Agency, to really map and monitor on a continuous basis which are those technologies which are critical and we need to reduce dependencies. The question is, once you have that mapping, which are the actions you undertake to fill the gap? And to make sure that you reduce effectively your dependencies. This is where you have a challenge. So we need to work more together, the European Space Agency, the European Defence Agency, to really coordinate the investment we're making, each of us, to ensure that in the years to come, in the next decades, we're indeed reducing dependencies in certain critical areas. This is very high on the agenda of the European Commission, the notion of non-technological dependencies. You know, we are setting up instruments, an observatory to screen on a systematic basis where are those dependencies. We have set up an instrument called Foreign Direct Investment Screening Mechanism to establish kind of cooperation between member states to avoid that certain assets are taken over by non-EU actors. So there are plenty of tools at European level to really reinforce security of supply. We need to continue, and what matters to me is really that we coordinate investment. We have Horizon Europe, which will be used by DigiDefis to reduce those dependencies, and here we will work hand in hand with the European Space Agency and the European Defence Agency to really reduce those dependencies.
Thank you very much. I still have plenty of questions, but maybe there is one which is specifically addressed to Elodie, which is about the Moonlight project. But while Elodie will elaborate on this one, I would like to invite you to get prepared to obviously the last challenge that I'm going to pose to you today, which is to try to propose your reply to this question that we want to tackle with this conference, which is why does Europe need European-made satellites? So, but while you reflect on this, Elodie, I would like you to maybe invite you to explain us how the push for lunar and Mars human exploration will impact innovation and technological resiliency in deep space communication networks. But Nicolas, you might have some ideas on that as well. And what will be the role of ESA's Moonlight initiative? So this one is definitely for you.
Okay, so while we were talking about the connectivity around the Earth, that this connectivity is driving the Earth economy, so it's developing all the applications that we have been talking about, being civilian or being military application, being on the sea, in air or on land. So in a similar way, we see a lot of initiative from institutions and from private actors going back to the moon. Back to the moon in order to stay there in a sustainable way. So we see that in Europe, we see that worldwide, and therefore there is this initiative Moonlight that you are mentioning, where the idea is like, okay, when we go there, we are a need to develop a service around the moon, like the European Space Agency had helped with the institution to develop the first operators around the Earth, is to be able to develop the same capability around the moon, so to have a telecommunication and navigation service around the moon that will allow to go there sustainably and to develop what we call the lunar economy. So that can be seen as a forefront, but that's what we have to be at the European Space Agency. We have to be ambitious and to lead again the way to be able to be developing those new services. We have a lunar pathfinder that is going to be there in 2024, providing initial capability, and therefore after that we want to develop but in a way where it can become a sustainable operating privately system around the world. So of course for such ambition there is a need for the institution to step in order to make that happen. If not, for the private sector is a bit further away. There will be two targets. First of all, the robotics. There is a lot of mission that will be establishing robotics around the moon, and that will lower the entry cost of those missions to have this system, because they can establish those systems, and therefore new entrepreneurs can also reach with rovers on the moon without having to carry a heavy system on each of their missions to go towards open and standard system around the moon. So that's one element. And then after that, when humans will go there, we have seen during this COVID situation how much the social is important. When we talked with Thomas Pesquet in the past, he mentioned how much important for him when he is in the International Space Station, it is the social media contact being on the professional life or on the personal life. So therefore, this is a key element to have when you want to go on the moon. And finally, there is this mission that can be looked at. Why are we doing that in space when there is so many urgent things to be dealt with on Earth? It's because when we do that, we develop also spin-off technology, or we develop the economy on Earth of those enterprises that are developing those systems to go there. So the telecommunication means that we develop around the Earth. To a large extent, we are developing further towards the other planets. And that's why we are pushing those innovations in addition to looking at what is going on planet Earth. We were talking about Copernicus, we were talking about Galileo, that are those systems that we are being established and with leading the innovation in the past, and we need to go further and forward. And this is not far away from your previous question, and I will finish there. with the autonomy, because we were mentioning the autonomy is the first step towards collaboration with Galileo and the GPS, or with Copernicus and other data that can be integrated with it. So when we talk about integrated application and integrated application with AI, that's where the telecommunication, the navigation, and the Earth observation gets together to be stronger. And when we go to the next step, we will see that those aspects will happen on Earth, on the Moon, and will integrate new innovations that go towards supercomputing or artificial intelligence. So all those elements, those innovations need to be done in a step approach, but we need to tackle the problem right now.
Thank you very much, Elodie. So now, quickly around the table, why does Europe need European satellites? 10 seconds. Mr. Capet.
Well, we need it for sustainability of Europe and its citizens, the safety of their data, our personal private lives, for all the diplomatic aspects due to the fact that everything now is most of the time it's dual-use aspects, so it's very important, and because Europe has strong values, space is definitely one of the most valuable assets we have in Europe. This is a way to balance the different forces in the world, and so Europe has its place and needs to get this place.
Well, from a military perspective, it's quite easy. The request to the EU is to be more capable of running crisis management operations and missions. And what I said before, no SATCOM, no operation. And that's one of the things which I for sure want also to expand beyond SATCOM on intelligence and other areas.
David.
Well, I mean, other speakers have and will, I guess, speak eloquently again about autonomy, so I will not focus on this. I'll have a kind of private sector answer, but the reason is really that SATCOMs are the driver of the European space industry today. And so Europe cannot afford to miss the boat or spacecraft that will take space into the new connectivity age. There's a whole ecosystem, both old and new, to sustain, and this will not last if Europe does not have a determined policy in the satellite domain.
I'll be very short. I mean, you need European-made satellites to make Europe. It's about the well-functioning of the single market. It's about social cohesion. It's about Green Deal. It's about resilience. As simple as that.
Yeah, thank you. We need European-made space systems. We need to be a bit more generic. Well, we need it for our economy and its sustainable growth. We need it for our safety. We need it for our security. In the end, we need it for our European way of life and for our future.
Thank you. Elodie?
So I will be very, very short. We need it exactly for the economy. I think it's very important because now we have said at the very beginning it's a data-centric economy, and therefore to have those data resilient, robust, available, confidential, and integrity of those data, we need absolutely a European ecosystem that develops.
Thank you very much, and I will conclude on these words of wisdom, and I really wonder why would anybody really ask this question, why? But okay, so this concludes our second session of this 15th Autumn Conference, and I would like in the name of all our auditors to thank you very much for having shared your views, your thoughts with us today on this challenges ahead of Europe regarding the new digital age and how space can contribute. I hope that you had as much pleasure attending this session as I had in moderating it. And I would like to also remind you that our conference is not over. We'll have a third session tomorrow. So this will be about which space industrial strategy to face new global challenges. And the session would address which new industrial and economic strategies will be required to ensure the resilience of the European space industry and enhance, once again, strategic autonomy. It will be about, once again, supply chain, but also it will be about procurement and public demand. And we'll have another quite prestigious panel with a keynote speaker, André Hubert-Roussel, as president of Eurospace. And the panelists will be Andreas Bull, who is country manager at RUAG Space, Riyad Kamoun, Vice President for Public and Regulatory Affairs at Thales Alenia Space, Geraldine Naja, Acting Director for Industry Procurement and Legal Services at the European Space Agency, as well as Olga Stelmark-Drescher, who is Chief Policy and Government Relations Officer at Exolange, and last but not least, Mr. Théo Voast, who is Regional Director Europe at ESPI, so another quite successful European startups, and Geneviève Fioraso, a former French Minister in charge of space and currently Chair of ESPI Advisory Council, will deliver some closing remarks. So I hope that you will join us again tomorrow, and I look forward to another exciting session. Thank you very much.